All right. An uncharacteristic Monday evening recording.
Yeah, man.
It's good. I'm feeling strong.
Oh, I'm not. I'm feeling exhausted. I don't know. I mean, I have somewhat of a long work day, and I do this thing where I think I mentioned this on the show before, that I basically have like two speeds when it comes to playing video games. Like I either don't play them at all for long periods of time, or I either that, or I just ruin my life with them and stay up till 3 a.m. when I have to work, 11 hours the next day. So it's kind of when I'm at the tail end of it at the moment, but here we are.
So how I appreciate that you say that, because I get it. I think, when I look at kind of like my work style, and I don't think this is particularly unique, but when I need to get things done, I do, in fitness, there's that thing called high intensity interval training.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So periods of extreme, effort followed by periods of rest and stuff. And that's pretty much how I live my life. I don't think that's unreasonable. It's weird to see how the economy has just failed to adapt. And this is, I think a lot about this when we think about the idea of a transition towards a more equitable economy and more democratic decision making within the economy and stuff like that, and so worker co-ops, et cetera, et cetera. But as we've seen time and time again, it's not even the money or the profits that actually are the hardest parts of our capitalistic shit to shed. It's within an organization. It's the top down decision making is the hardest thing to do, and so it's just so weird. 8-hour shifts maybe made sense with the fucking Ford's assembly line or whatever, but why do office jobs or whatever still have nobody sits and thinks for 8 hours? It's insane. It's just so funny to me how little our working culture has adapted. I mean, many of our go ahead.
What's even sicker really that I always think about is the fact that that is we have so deeply ingrained this sort of competitive individualist sort of capitalist bullshit that it's a good thing to work more than 40 hours. Hell, you want to get ahead, don't you? You want to be successful. You need to hustle. You can't just, you got to work 60, 70 hours. That's why you get these, I think Elon Musk or there's certain CEOs I know. I'm pretty sure Elon Musk was one of them that tried to talk about, how they work fucking 80 hours a week or something like that.
Stupid.
You don't work at all.
Stupid.
You don't have a real job.
And even then too, I honestly think for, the people that ascend to those heights, or even just not even that, just your run-of-the-mill CEO or whatever, what is addicting for them is being in a position of power and is being able to make decisions and shit. And oftentimes, and especially for private companies or whatever, it's what are the consequences of you can just blame somebody if something doesn't go right.
Yeah,
you could just say, oh, you didn't execute it right. It doesn't have anything to do with whether or not your idea was good or bad or whatever. If the initiative that you thought of fails, you just be like, yeah, look at this fucking moron that I put in charge to do this. God, he didn't get it right. Anyway, don't know what I learned, but we moved on.
What's the French work week now? Isn't it? I know they've raised it, but it's still not quite 40 hours, right? It was 34 for a while, I believe, or something.
Yeah, 34, 35.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, and then I think as when Macron would be hey, let's move it to 37 hours, they would literally, farmers would drive in from the countryside and paint government buildings with manure.
Yeah.
That's the fucking energy we need!
Exactly, yeah. We've internalized and has been much more affected by this sort of just deep neoliberal rot that has set in over the past 40 years or so, that it's virtuous to want to work more than 40 hours a week. You should want to do that for your boss. Don't you want to make them happy and get ahead and work 60 hours a week? That's a virtuous thing to do.
Look, I'm far from a scholar on nearly anything. Except maybe things that are good with ketchup. But the thing, my understanding is that in Marx's time or whatever, about seizing the means of production, it was there's these, here's a factory and they made pots and pans or whatever. And if, there was an opportunity to seized the means of production, there's like, one guy that owned it. But like, how do you seize Amazon?
Right.
Like, how do you seize Facebook, where they've got fucking, all of their servers are built into the side of a mountain next to a hydroelectric dam and shit. Like, how do you seize that?
Yeah,
like back then you could just like, tie the fucking foreman to a chair and be like, listen, this is how we're going to do things from now on.
Well, the other part of that as well, I guess the other side of that is that like also, as compared to like, when everybody in the town, they all worked at the factory together, they knew each other, they had a sense of solidarity and community, and they may have, walked to work together and walked home, and, everybody is so sort of, atomized now that like even sort of like building that coalition, building that sort of sense of solidarity. People don't have, they're not spending the type of time with their coworkers largely, outside of work that allows people to have these kind of conversations. Like, hey, you fucking hate this shit too, so do I, and it's just, it's just become so much harder.
Yep, it's just us just sitting at home. You close the bad screen and open up the good screen. That's the end of the workday.
Yeah, basically.
And just scroll endlessly on TikTok.
Not me. No, not me though. That's. I just need to clarify. Dwight is not speaking for both of us here.
No. Although I am consuming enough for the both of us. And maybe that just speaks to the fact that look, the how can I put it? The severity of the exploitation and the crushing systems that they've created for us to not rise up and seize the means. Maybe that just means that we need to, the tactics that are used in order to seize the means just need to rise to the occasion of being, all the more severe. And with that, I will say nothing more, because that is all that I can say and publish. Should probably roll the intro before anything happens.
Sure, let's do it.
Okay, bye.
Now when I was a young boy, about the age of 5, my teachers taught me I could be the greatest man alive. They told me I could change the world, be whatever I wanted to be. There was no one in the world like me. Every one of us was so unique. I'd not be an average man. No sir, I'd be no average man. So I had those big dreams.
Welcome back, everyone, to Eat the Rich. This is a show about our political economy, late-stage capitalism, and the millionaires, billionaires, and multinational corporations hell-bent on staving off his death rattle. I'm Dwight, and today we have with us Chris.
Hello.
So, friends, the idea for this episode to talk about David Rubenstein came from a specific thing that just blew my mind around Thanksgiving time that put it on our radar. Although I've been familiar with David Rubenstein for some time because he is a lot of the kind of figures that we've talked about on the show are often interviewed by him. He's made himself like kind of like an interviewer, right?
Yeah,
like it's his shtick, which we'll talk about and we'll sum up like his whole kind of thing later on. But I want to just start off quickly by talking about the Bidens and their kind of like long love affair with Nantucket, and that's fine and whatever. And they've always, apparently since 1975, I'm just reading from this Politico thing about why Scranton Joe loves Nantucket. I got a joke about it. I can't talk about it on the mic. Sorry. I'm sorry. Anyway, so he and his family had been going to Nantucket's, for 45 years or something like that. But what's interesting is that recently, he's been going to a very specific house in Nantucket, and that has been the estate or one of the vacation homes of billionaire David Rubenstein. And I'm going to I'm just going to read here from just something this why does Scranton Joe loves Nantucket. And so sorry, I can't do it. It says here, with its quaint New England charm, pristine beaches, and Hallmark-like settings, the small island off of Cape Cod has a reputation as a ritzy getaway. As long as they have in the past, the Bidens are renting the vacation home of billionaire David Rubenstein. the co-founder of the private equity firm, the Carlyle Group.
Wait, are they renting it? It'd be funny if he's actually making them like pay for it.
So great question, right? And like, how would we know unless I don't know. I don't know that, and I haven't been able to find that. If somebody has been able to find that, DM Shane. But it's just so crazy because at the time, and for the record, he wasn't there. Mm-hmm. He was not spending Thanksgiving. In fact, it said he was like overseas or something like that. Whatever that means. His spokesperson said.
Yeah, he was meeting with the Bin Ladens in Saudi Arabia at the time.
But what was so crazy about the timing, and like keep in mind, this was this is two months ago. Mm-hmm. Is this was really in the beginning of kind of the whispers of Omicron coming to the United States and what it was doing in South Africa. Just taking L after L. The Biden administration has just been in the dog shit for the entirety of the time that they've been in power. And I think what's even more callous about it is like at the time when so many Americans are hurting and losing their jobs, losing their lives, that he chose to go to Nantucket and spend it in a fucking billionaire's house. Like they didn't even give a shit about the optics. Like that's what's so crazy. And so to explain this away, I'm going to play a clip here from the Minister of Pain, Jen Psaki, being asked a question by Biden's apparently favorite Fox News reporter, Peter Doocy. Mm-hmm. And we're just laughing because like 2 hours ago it came out that, Joe Biden swore on a hot mic or whatever, and he was talking about Peter Doocy.
Thank you, guys.
Will you take questions on inflation then?
Let's move. Thank you. Thank you
Do
all.
you think inflation is a political liability?
That's a great asset. More inflation. What a stupid son of a bitch.
Anyway, so let's play this clip from Jen Psaki, how they explain it away.
Just one more topic. What message does it send to the middle-class Americans President Biden says that he's trying to help, who are struggling this week to cover the cost of the most expensive Thanksgiving ever, that the president is going to take a few days off at a billionaire's compound in Nantucket?
Well, first I would say, I don't know if you've cooked a turkey before, but a 20-pound turkey is a pretty big turkey. I think we can all agree. They're about $1 more.
I hate
so
you.
Not to minimize that, any increase in prices is something the president is concerned about, as is evidenced by his announcement today and as his efforts to push forward on additional relief for the American people. But I just want to be clear that there are abundance of turkeys available. They're about $1 more for a 20-pound bird, which is a huge bird if you're feeding a very big family. And that's something that, again, we've been working to make sure people have more money in their pockets to address it as the economy is turning back on.
But the president said today that he was sent here to look out for these working and middle-class families who are strained right now. So what should they read into him leaving now at this time of great personal financial hardship for so many to go to Nantucket?
Let them eat turkey.
Well, first I would say, Peter, that I hope you're spending time with your family. I'm spending
all
time with
over
my family. And I hope everybody in here is spending
over.
time with their families. This is a time to put politics aside.
It's
spend
only
time with
politics.
your loved ones and talk about what you're grateful for. I will also tell you from spending some time working for this president and a past president that you are president no matter where you are. He will conduct his work from wherever he is, on any vacation, on any time he is in Delaware, at Camp David, or wherever he may be spending time with his loved ones. He has secure phone capabilities. He has staff traveling with him, and I think the American people can be assured that he will continue to press to lower their costs and ensure they have more breathing room. Go ahead, Monica.
Wow.
What I think about so much is that just how much the Republican Party has been able to sort of effectively position themselves as the party of the working class or the middle class or fucking whatever. So that's why you get to have that fucking Peter Doocy, who doesn't give a fucking shit about working class Americans,
exactly.
Framing the question in that way. But at every step of the way that the Republicans have done that, the Democrats have ceded all of that to them. I mean, they've gone along with it every step of the way in basically completely divorcing themselves of any sort of base they had in labor or in the working class or anything like that, and they're quite happy to seems be seen as the party of the elites for whatever reason.
Exactly. I mean, and I firstly just want to go on record that I spit water over everything that I own on my laptop and my wall and my mic. But it's so fucking... The White House press secretary said, let's put politics aside.
Mm-hmm.
The White House press secretary said, no politics, please. What fucking delusion. Fucking delusion. And again, like, you know,
well, it's easy to put politics aside when you're not affected by them in any sort of way.
Exactly.
When you're above, like, at a level where you're above any of that.
I mean, what's just so crazy, too, is that, you know, this is very well scripted, right? Because she says it's about, for a 20-pound turkey, it's about $1 more.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if you look at that in a percentage...
Exactly.
It's like even if, you know, if it's like a 3% increase on food on America, like that's a big deal. That's a really big deal. I mean, economists look at this in like marginal effects, right? Like when you look at a graph of supply and demand or whatever, and when you raise, you raise the price, the demand changes and you price people out. That's how it works. It's just so crazy to me that like they just explain that all away by just saying like, no, it's not a big deal. We're happy to have price increases on a family. It's the gaslighting from this administration. Like we're not even talking about David Rubenstein. I'm just so fucking mad about this.
Well, I just wanted to say as well about inflation. It seems to me like it's almost sort of in a sort of way, sort of what happened in the 70s, where wages are increasing. We did see an increase in wages this year, in the past year, not by a whole lot, but we did see that. We did see an increase in wages more in a shorter period of time than we have seen in a while. And I mean, the capitalists have to get their profits from somewhere. So if they're having to pay more to their workers, then they're going to raise the prices of the goods to keep that profit coming in. At least that's just what makes sense to me. I know there's other obviously factors in that as well.
And when this is why it's such bullshit, because when inflation occurs, that means that input prices increase. And when input increases, that means that profits decrease, right? A firm's input costs are increasing, so it's eating into their profit margins. But because companies are having record profits, I just don't fucking buy the supply chain issues. Is the reason we got an inflation. We're gonna have to make some tough choices as a country. It's bullshit.
Well, we're getting too uppity. We're quitting our jobs. We're wanting better wages. Every once in a while they just have to put us in our place like this.
Even Richard fucking Nixon, in 1971 did the quote Nixon shock, as an effort to curb inflation. And what he did was there were wage freezes, so you couldn't get paid more, but there were price freezes. That you couldn't, meaning that companies could not increase the prices of their goods. And they also did tariffs and stuff like that. And I believe they also got rid of like the gold standard and shit. So anyway, there's things that you can do, and fucking Richard Nixon was able to do it. So like, it's amazing when the United States government says like, we're the most powerful, least powerful entity on planet Earth.
Well, it's wild and I think that kind of puts in perspective just how much the sort of like neoliberal turn has just affected everything. It's hard to imagine, like you're saying. It's wild just how much that sort of like post-war like New Deal consensus was upheld, by politicians, presidents of both parties until the late 70s and then especially in the 80s when the decision was made and they knew exactly what they were doing to sort of dismantle all of that, and we've been sort of like suffering and kind of sliding downhill from that ever since.
Can't wait for two-party fascism. Anyway, so getting back to David Rubenstein, the reason that we wanted to talk about him, obviously, is that he's been a figure that has like been in the orbit of nearly every freaking billionaire and CEO and financial services, character that we've talked about on this show, in kind of modern history. And so we wanted to talk about him and understand like what is his function, because it's so weird. He's this kind of like mildly charismatic guy. Like, you know, he's, as far as like billionaires go, he seems like somebody that is relatively approachable, and that's the reason that he's made himself available as an interviewer. But I think, Chris, let me turn it over to you quickly so that we can talk a little bit about his background.
Sure.
And where he came from before we kick it off.
Yeah, I'll give a little bit of a background here on him, and I had to say as well. This is the second time that like in the course of like doing research into one of these private equity ghouls, I've like gone down a rabbit hole of watching clips of JB Smoove on Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Yeah.
It started originally when we were doing the Leon Black episode, because that is actually what that character's name was. But when I was like reading about Rubenstein the other night, I just kept thinking, do you remember the episode where the one line from Curb where he's impersonating Danny Duberstein? He's doing like I'm Danny Duberstein, I have Groat's disease.
I do this shit loud.
Let me hear it.
I'm all up in that bitch. Hey, how you doing today? I'm Danny Duberstein. I heard you have Groat's disease. See that shit?
No.
That's just what I kept playing in my mind over and over again, to the point where the Word document that has all my notes for this is titled Danny Duberstein. So I just had to put that out there.
That's great. That's great.
But yeah, so David Rubenstein, he was born in 1949 and raised in the northwestern part of Baltimore, which at the time was a predominantly Jewish neighborhood. His father, and by the way, most of this sort of background biography comes from a New Yorker profile of David Rubenstein from, I believe, 2016. It looks like. But his father was a mail sorter for the Postal Service. His mother was a homemaker. He attended City College, which is an all-male public high school. His classmates back then described him as a bit of a loner, serious-minded, preferring to sort of keep to himself, which is sort of kind of like, not like you were saying, like now he's sort of has this, I suppose, charisma perhaps in his own way, at least enough to be able to, like, I guess, be an effective interviewer.
The bar is low in that echelon, in fairness.
Yeah, I mean, and like having billions of dollars, I guess, gives you a fucking shot of confidence that you can't compare to anything else. So I guess I get that. But the way, one of his high school classmates described him was, he said, quote, he was very, very quiet. He liked to talk about government and politics, not so much about business. He graduated from Duke and then went on to the University of Chicago Law School. Then after that, he spent 2 years at the corporate law firm Paul Weiss. After that, he served as the counsel to Senator Birch Bayh, who was a Democrat of Indiana, on the subcommittee on constitutional amendments. In 1976, he joined Jimmy Carter's presidential campaign as a policy aide, and subsequently hired as a deputy to Stuart Eisenstadt, who was Carter's domestic policy advisor. In his capacity there at the Carter White House, he helped write memos for the president. He helped prepare him for press conferences, and helped draft State of the Union addresses. His boss there, Eisenstadt, again described him as, quote, almost painfully shy. He almost never spoke to the press. He kept his head down. He almost never spoke in meetings. I get that one. I don't want to speak in meetings either. But while working in the Carter administration, he met Alice Rogoff, who we'll get into a bit more later, who was an assistant to the director of the Office of Management and Budget. They eventually got married in 1983. It's interesting to me as well. What I've kind of like couldn't help but think about a lot, like through this. Through this research is, speaking of, I think this is maybe why I keep kind of thinking about sort of like the the neoliberal turn of the late 70s. It's interesting to me that David Rubenstein was like at the ground zero of that, like working in the in the Carter administration, at the time when Paul Volcker was first made the chair of the Federal Reserve, and sort of all of these this sort of like decline into neoliberalism that was then accelerated by the Reagan administration. But it's interesting to me in that, like, because that was also at the time that, like, private equity firms also are almost sort of like, able to sort of like make so much money and do what they do because of that sort of turn. In fact,
Yes.
like what part of the big, like a big part of that, of the neoliberal project, I guess, is it neoliberalism is constantly sort of like seeking new markets, seeking new things to commodify, seeking new things to turn profit on, and that is also very much how private equity firms operate, is by doing those sorts of things, and branching out, as we'll get into, and eventually by the early 2000s, like fucking like buying up like hospitals and nursing homes and all these like institutes that were not like for-profit institutes, and then turning them trying to squeeze every bit of capital out of them that they can, and turn them into for-profit institutes. But Rubenstein says that he said he was crushed when Carter lost to Reagan in 1980. I guess probably because he was, out of a job as well. In 1981, he took a job at the Mergers and Acquisitions Group at the law firm Shaw, Pittman, Potts, and Trowbridge, but began getting bored with legal work, and kind of wanted to start exploring a career change. And this was in the like I said, this was in the early 80s. This was when the first private equity firms were first starting to spring up. They were called leveraged buyouts at the time, more than private equity firms. Bain Capital, Kohlberg, Kravis, Roberts,
friends of the show,
couple heavy hitters. Yeah,
our sponsors.
Name a more iconic duo. I'll wait. And he's very frank. He's frank when you hear him talk about this sort of stuff as to why he started thinking about deciding to get into to starting a private equity firm. And he's like sort of said very frankly, well, I had all of these contacts in government, and nobody started a private equity firm yet, and chosen their partners, based on their relationship with government officials. We could really do a lot with this. And then in 1986, Rubenstein gets his big break. Senator Ted Stevens from Alaska, who you may remember for letting us all know that the internet is a series of tubes, is not a big truck that you can put stuff on.
They deliver in other ways, but they want to deliver vast amounts of information over the internet. And again, the internet is not something that you just dump something on. It's not a big truck. It's a series of tubes. And if you don't understand, those tubes can be filled, and if they're filled, when you put your message in, it gets in line, it's going to be delayed by anyone that puts into that tube enormous amounts of material.
But he's also totally morally bankrupt and corrupt, Ted Stevens as well. And in 1986, he initiated a change to the federal tax code. It was like this very short-lived tax loophole that was closed the next year. And what that did was allow Alaskan native corporations to sell their paper losses at a discount to companies from elsewhere that could then use them to reduce their own taxes.
Jesus.
And Stephen Norris, who was a friend of Rubenstein's at the time, he started a business, essentially acted as like a matchmaker to match native Alaskan companies to other companies that would be willing to buy the losses and all that sort of stuff. And he persuades Rubenstein to leave the law firm that he was at and to come join him. In a single year, by doing that, they brokered the transfer of at least $10 billion in losses. From doing that, they earned at least $10 million in fees. And like I said, that tax loophole was closed the next year, and so I guess he then had to move on to new scams. And so in September of 1987, he founded the Carlyle Group.
I can't believe like how well you explain that, because like. That's exactly what I've been thinking about when kind of like looking into his background, is that I think, and I'll just this is my conclusion, like I'll just cut to the chase now. Like I think he saw the neoliberal turn better than anyone.
Yeah.
Because, the whole idea of neoliberalism is to, like you were saying, like, continuously trying to find markets, continuously trying to find new things to commodify. And most importantly, to the neoliberal doctrine is to like, what we can take public, we will take private. Mm-hmm. Like what we can convert public to private is good, right? So that's That's the idea. And I think he saw, because in my head, I'm like, his background doesn't make sense to me as like a private equity guy. Like the private equity guys would be like, maybe they had money themselves, or they came from a family office, or, you know, they were these consultants or something like that. And, you know, like we've seen with the backgrounds of like KKR and all that stuff when we've did an episode on them. But with him, it's like he's a kind of a lawyer, but he was kind of like a White House staffer. It just didn't make sense until you realize that he understood better than most that if you want to kill it, I mean, if you want to really own the economy, which is what private equity is there for, and you know, and has exploded hand in hand with neoliberalism, you need to manipulate government. That's where the money is. And he's continued to do this, and I think it's been his fascination. So I'm just gonna just kind of like a little smorgasbord of things about him. One of the most insane things that I think he's done, and I'm reading from a Times Online article here from 2007. Magna Carta bought for $21 million. The Magna Carta, or a copy of it at least, bought by U.S. tycoon David Rubenstein for $21 million. It says the only copy of the Magna Carta, the only copy of the Magna Carta in private hands sold for $21 million this morning in the first auction of the birth certificate of freedom, which, you know, whatever. The 1297 example, and I mean that's a year, I'm saying. The year 1297 is when this was.
That's not a real year. You just made that up.
Is when it was written, described as the most important document to come up for sale, was acquired by David Rubenstein, one of the founders of the Carlyle Group at Sotheby's. This is a dumb metric, but I like it. He has paid $8,528 per word. Who says
I've
that?
never paid that much for a word. Stupid, ridiculous.
Yeah, I know. Jesus Christ, barely a few bucks. It says here the 14 by 16 inch sheet of animal skin vellum is one of only 17 originals of the founding, quote, Great Charter of English Liberties, first signed by the King John at Runnymede, near the present-day Staines in Surrey in 1215. In case you're unfamiliar, the document established the principle of habeas corpus, which protects people against unlawful imprisonment by ensuring such rights as trial by jury and freedom from unlawful arrest. That is, of course, if you are a migrant seeking refuge, political refuge.
Yeah, there was
never
never any sort of government suppression in the United Kingdom after that point.
No. There's a big I note here that there's a large asterisk next to habeas corpus. Note may not apply to all. Anyway, so again, just a weird thing for him to do. He had an interview. This is a good one. He says he regrets not buying the Washington Post.
I saw that. Yeah, I saw that.
I love how you can just have a regret like that. I mean, I have a regret for not buying the LA Times.
Yeah.
And he said, well, I was the third person to be asked. And so that, he was kind of put off by that, I guess. He says, but whatever. We don't need to go into that too much. And here's just another little bit about him. He has a book called The American.
He has a few books, yeah, I believe. Yeah, he's big into, like, he publishes these books that are sort of like almost like the fucking almost like Bill O'Reilly books. These sort of like schlock, like pop American history books.
It's like Aaron Sorkin shit, though. It's like, the this is the book that I was looking for here. It says The American Experiment: Dialogues on a Dream.
Yeah,
like it's like a fucking
the listeners can't
monkeys.
See me, but I'm doing the air jerking off motion at the moment.
It's just like one of those things, like 1,000 monkeys at 1,000 typewriters for 1,000 years will like write this shit out. I mean, it's basic. It means nothing. It's who buy. This is the kind of shit that is at like a Hudson News at the airport. Like this is the kind of book you can buy in Grand Central before you take the Amtrak down to Union Station in DC. Like meaningless pablum. Anybody, I'm just actually thinking about the kind of person that would spend money on that and getting so angry. Like a very specific type of like completely disconnected, jaded boomer, I think would probably buy that and be like, yeah, that was amazing.
Absolutely.
Wow. Anyway, so just a strange character for that sort of things. But also what about him is I find to be super fascinating is that one of the ways that he's ensured his connectedness is to just be everywhere where this kind of seat of power is. Mm-hmm. And so I'm just reading here from, his kind of high level summary. It says he's the chairman of the Kennedy Center for Performing Arts. He's the chairman of the National Gallery of Art. He's the chairman on the Council of Foreign Relations.
Put a pin in that one. We'll get back to that one.
Yes, we will. Yes, we will. He's the chairman of the Economic Club of Washington, D.C., former chairman of the Duke University Board of Trustees, former chairman of the Smithsonian Institution. And for those that, since we weren't clear about this beforehand, he is worth $4.3 billion, in case you were wondering to know.
Well, this is kind of like ties right into like what we kind of talk about all the time with these guys is this sort of like philanthropy type stuff, right? Like you have to make yourself, like you have to have all these sort of commitments because you have to make yourself a good, respectable member of society. You have to appear to nominally give back or sit on the board of these organizations or sit on the board of these charities and sort of stuff like that. You have to do that kind of stuff.
Yes.
And he actually defends, I mean, of course he does, but like he the way he defends what he does with private equity is to say that what we're ultimately doing is we're providing a service. We're buying these companies and helping them to run more efficiently. That's kind of the way he has to turn it in his own head. And maybe it would be a good time to sort of maybe give a quick rundown of what exactly private equity firms do. Again, I know we've talked about it quite a bit, but essentially what they do is pool a bunch of money from investors, generally borrow even more money, basically, get a bunch of debt in on the deal. The part that the private equity firm is usually contributing to the investment pool is perhaps somewhere as low as 5 or 10%, maybe a bit more. Most of the money will be borrowed by the company that they're purchasing. So they essentially purchase the companies and load them down with the debt from the deal, and then essentially just sort of strip them from parts and sell off things that aren't profitable, lay people off, cut costs, sort of do everything they can to squeeze every bit of fucking profit out of it that they can, and then sell it as quickly as they can.
In any functioning economy, this behavior would be completely illegal.
Yeah.
Like there's absolutely no justification.
Yeah, I mean,
I think it should be illegal.
The most awful and predatory, I think, aspect of like just the most awful and predatory industry.
And as an example, now I should mention that at some point we will do an episode specifically on the Carlyle Group because they are one of the largest, private equity firms out there, up with Bain Capital and KKR, as we were discussing before. And I think, and many times in the kind of history of the firm, it's been the largest in terms of assets under management. But just to read here as an example of the kind of like the indifference of capital, of indifference in the face of human suffering. Mm-hmm. I'm just reading here from an AZ Central article, Arizona Central. It says 4 older Mesa mobile home parks sold to big investor for $230 million. It says here, Washington, D.C. based investor paid $230 million for 4 older Mesa mobile homes on mobile home parks on Monday, upping its stake in the Arizona affordable housing market. Just take that term real quickly, the Arizona affordable housing market. And that's exactly what you were referring to, Chris, about like neoliberalism, hand in hand with capital to just like make markets. Arizona affordable housing should not be a market that can like be commoditized and bought and sold. It's fucking insane. It's delusional. It should, again, in any functioning country, like it would be made illegal. But it says here, the Carlyle Group bought more than 1,000 mobile and manufactured home lots in 4 parks built mostly in the 60s and 70s, according to public real estate records. The investor owns a handful of other mobile home parks in Metro Phoenix, as well as dozens across the United States. Again, so it just doesn't make sense. It just simply doesn't make sense. So I think, this is far from the end of what Carlyle Group has done.
Yeah, I guess I'll maybe a good time to hop in on some of the other briefly. I think I maybe would like to do a bit more of an in-depth episode about the Carlyle Group. But I did kind of just want to go over a few of their greatest hits. And he wasn't lying when he said that he was going to reach out to his contacts in government and to get them on board with his private equity firm. He started doing that like basically immediately after he started the firm. He started the firm in 1987. 2 years later, after his term as Secretary of Defense ended, Frank Carlucci, Reagan's last Secretary of Defense, came on board. Actually, in 1992 it was, and he was the chairman of the Carlyle Group during that time frame. Jim Baker, the former Secretary of State, also came to work at the Carlyle Group. Former President George H.W. Bush, eventually came on board at the Carlyle Group in the late '90s, eventually to help them close a deal to purchase a South Korean bank. But I think he stayed on board to do 9/11 with them.
What?
I'm joking. No, I'm not saying that the Carlyle Group did 9/11, but I'm not saying that the Carlyle Group did 9/11.
Good.
I just do want to point out a couple coincidences, and I guess maybe a little bit of background on that is that. So one of the types of firms that the Carlyle Group specifically liked to buy was defense industry firms,
Yes.
which they started doing. That was one of the kind of earlier things that they began getting invested in. Right at the end of the Soviet Union falls, it's the end of the Cold War. Some of these weapons manufacturers, defense industry companies are not getting the money coming in that they were prior to that. So a lot of them were kind of right to be bought up by these private equity firms at that time. And would you believe it? Very shortly after they bought up all of these defense industry companies, the Gulf War starts. Imagine that with George H.W. Bush in the White House, who obviously had worked with like Frank Carlucci and Jim Baker during the Reagan years, and all of these people. These were former like Reagan White House people that the Carlyle Group was full of, and so they a lot of where they made their money was in these defense industry firms. And one of the ones that they purchased, I believe, a little bit later was United Defense, that manufactured the Crusader missile. The Crusader missile,
Wow.
It was by the late '90s, like the Department of Defense, they did like a panel to sort of like like an audit of some of their weaponry that may not be so useful anymore in the modern age. So the Crusader missile was sort of one of these things. It's like big, bulky, like howitzer type fucking cannon. It's like big and slow and fucking basically a remnant of like when we thought we were going to be preparing for like a ground war in Eastern Europe or some shit like that.
Yep.
And so basically by the late '90s, the Department of Defense had made the decision that they weren't going to buy any more of those, that they weren't going to use them anymore. Well, that wasn't so great for United Defense and the Carlyle Group, who owned United Defense. Now, George W. Bush, once he came in office,
My president.
he did push through, I think it was in 2002, it was like the big increase in the defense budget right after 9/11. It was like $48 billion or something like that, kind of like hidden in that defense spending increase was Crusader missiles. After the point that the Department of Defense had already made the decision that they weren't going to use them anymore, that they were outdated, George W. Bush administration included them in the Defense Department budget anyway, at a time when his father worked at the Carlyle Group, who like owned the company that needed to sell them to turn a profit on them.
Unreal.
And they made a very handsome profit off that, as they did off of 9/11. Now, here's the kind of thing I was alluding to. On 9/11, on September 11th, 2001, the Carlyle Group was having their annual investors meeting in Washington, D.C. Jim Baker was there. George H.W. Bush was there. A member of the Bin Laden group was there because they are the Bin Laden family are big investors in with the Carlyle Group. So is the Saudi royal family. So I'm not saying that they. I'm not saying
Very interesting.
I'm not saying that they did 9/11, but it's certainly worth. I would be remiss if I didn't point that out. I think another thing, real briefly, I kind of wanted to get into a little bit here was I mentioned earlier about the another thing that these private equity firms started branching out to in the early 2000s was like they started figuring out that like hospitals and nursing homes are like appealing targets for this kind of acquisition, due to numerous, obviously, inadequacies in the American healthcare system. A lot of hospitals tend to struggle financially, and these private equity firms, they know this, that they know that these hospitals may be struggling financially. They know that they may also have managerial deficiencies. They have, hospitals have a lot of untapped revenue streams that could be opened up if you just don't give a shit about patient care. Like if that's not your if that's not your main goal, there are other ways that you can figure out that you could make money. So that's what they do. They come in, they buy the hospital up, they tighten the purse strings a bit, cut costs, get the cash flow up. Hospitals always have a lot of uncollected bills. Private equity firm comes in, hey, call these deadbeats up, make them pay. What are we doing? And then what do they do with this increased revenue? Do they invest it back into the hospital to improve patient care? No, I mean, obviously, of course not. They're not interested, and I think I kind of said this sort of same thing in the Leon Black episode, but they're just simply not interested in the long-term health of the company. It couldn't matter to them at all. The whole business model of these private equity firms requires them to hold the company only very briefly and then sell it. So all of this available cash that they're getting in from this increased revenue is only going to pay down the loans that they took out and pay out dividends to their investors. And if there isn't enough cash there, well, they're just going to fucking squeeze it out however they can, even if they have to, cripple the company long term, just to get this short term money out of it by like gutting everything and squeezing every little bit of capital you can that you can get out of it. And so these private equity firms, they snapped up hundreds of hospitals in the early 2000s. KKR, Bain Capital, and Merrill Lynch Global Private Equity. They purchased HCA Hospital Group in 2006. That's the largest hospital group in the country, with 170 facilities at the time. And what you get obviously is a decline in patient care. Nursing staff is fired, or they have their hours reduced. Where there may have used to been a nurse to patient ratio of like 1 to 5, it may be now 1 to 10, or even worse. And so I'm saying all this to kind of what I wanted to get into here was Manor Care. In 2007, the Carlyle Group bought Manor Care, which is the largest. I'm not sure if it still is, but at the time, the largest operator of nursing homes in the country. In 2007, private equity firms owned 6 out of 10 of the largest nursing home chains, representing about 10% of all nursing homes in the United States owned by private equity firms in 2007.
Unreal.
The Manor Care deal was $6.1 billion. Most of the purchase price, again, borrowed money, mostly from pension funds, something else that should be fucking illegal, and other investment companies. $4.8 billion of that total was borrowed. Carlyle put up a total of $1.3 billion, which is actually pretty high. Usually the private equity firm's part of the pool is much smaller. And there's a whole lot of horror stories about the quality of patient care in these Manor Care facilities after the purchase. People dying, waiting for care. At one facility in Pennsylvania, there was a patient who had hit his head in a fall. They didn't call, there was nobody around to call a doctor for him. He died. 5 months later at the same facility, there was a woman who was complaining about head and chest pain. No doctor was called. She went into cardiac arrest later that day and died. The Washington Post did a a pretty good, pretty lengthy investigation of the Manor Care, a Carlyle Group owned Manor Care nursing homes in 2018. Just wanted to read a little bit of more anecdotal evidence from that article. To the state inspectors visiting the HCR Manor Care nursing home here last year, the signs of neglect were conspicuous. A disabled man who had long, dirty fingernails told them he was tended to, quote, once in a blue moon. The bedside call buttons were so poorly staffed that some residents regularly soiled themselves while waiting for help to the bathroom.
Fuck.
A woman dying of uterine cancer was left on a bedpan for so long that she bruised.
Jesus.
The lack of care had devastating consequences. One man had been dosed so many times with opioids that he had to be rushed to a hospital, according to the inspection reports. During an unsupervised bus trip to church, one staff member was escorting 6 patients who could not walk without help. A resident flipped backwards on a wheelchair ramp and suffered a brain hemorrhage. When a nurse's aide, who should have had a helper, was trying to lift a paraplegic woman, the woman fell and fractured her hip, her head landing on the floor beneath her roommate's bed. One worker at another Manor Care facility in 2015, who was interviewed in this profile, said that there was 2 CNAs, two certified nursing assistants for every 30 people in the facility.
That's sick.
Which is not even enough to get the residents up in the morning, to get them all out of bed. And in this Washington Post piece, they found that of the 230 facilities that they reviewed, the number of health code violations rose 26% each year between 2013 and 2017. When the Post asked the Carlyle Group, because they asked them for comment in this article, when they asked them about that, their response was that the rise in the number of violations, it was due to a change in the in the way the inspections are done, and that you would also see the number of inspections rising at other nursing homes, which is true. However, the number of violations at Manor Care rose 3 times faster than the control, I guess, like the other sort of nursing homes in the country. And the number of citations increased for, this is again reading directly from the article here, neither preventing nor treating bed sores, medication errors, not providing proper care for people who need special services such as injections, colostomies and prosthesis, and not assisting patients with eating and personal hygiene. Counting only the more serious violations, those categorized as potential for more than minimal harm, immediate jeopardy, and actual harm, the Washington Post found that the number of violations rose 29% in the years before the bankruptcy filing. Because, by the way, the Carlyle Group also drove this company into bankruptcy. So, you see, in addition to all of the things that I was talking about that make hospitals and nursing homes attractive to these private equity firms, Manor Care also happened to own, rather than lease, all of their own facilities and the land under them. So they have this very appealing real estate portfolio that also comes along with the deal. Manor Care's facilities were generally, well-maintained, newer buildings, very little mortgage debt. It was the real estate aspect of the deal was very appealing, and that was one of the main reasons that the Carlyle Group wanted it. They actually borrowed against the property in 2007 as part of financing the buyout. And then 4 years later, after they bought it in 2011, they sold the land. They sold all of the land. And as part of the agreement, Manor Care then had to pay rent to the new owners of the land, which is a real estate investment trust called HealthPeak. Carlyle got $6.1 billion in the sale, which was about approximately the same amount that they had paid for the company in the first place. They used that money to pay off the billions in debts that they'd racked up buying Manor Care. But more importantly, they got to recover the $1.3 billion that they put in. So they got that part of it back. And this is a deal that does nothing but this does nothing but generate profits for investors, and to saddle this company with a financial obligation that it's just not able to meet. This selling the land out from under these buildings what does it do? It doesn't do anything but just create money for these investors. Those rent payments that Manor Care was now obligated to pay totaled $472 million annually. with the rent, set to escalate by 3.5% a year. ManorCare also had to pay the property taxes, the insurance, and the upkeep of the homes. Shortly after the deal went through, this deal that made the Carlyle Group $6.1 billion. There were hundreds of layoffs right after it. That's when the layoffs started. Was after the real estate deal. And by the next year, by 2012, some of these facilities weren't even making enough to pay the rent, and they couldn't even barely stay afloat anymore. There was another round of cost cutting after that. Between 2010 and 2014, the amount that ManorCare spent on operations fell by 6%. So they tried to do this cost cutting, but they were just so over leveraged with all the debt and these financial obligations that the Carlyle Group saddled them with that they now can't keep. In 2016, they filed for bankruptcy. And as far as they asked when they asked the Carlyle officials from the Carlyle Group about this in the Washington Post piece, what had caused ManorCare's financial struggles, what they said that it was Medicare.
Oh, fuck off.
And there was a change to Medicare in October 2011 that reduced how much they paid for nursing home service. And so that's what caused the ManorCare's financial struggles. Some of the other ways that the Carlyle Group has made money off this deal, they've taken at least $80 million in various fees, mostly transaction fees. The transaction fee is another way that these private equity firms make money off these deals. They pool all the investor money, and then they take 1% of that investor pool, generally 1% for facilitating the deal. For the ManorCare deal, that was $61 million that the Carlyle Group made off that just for facilitating the deal. The Carlyle Group also received annual advisory fees from the companies that it purchases, which is in essence basically just like paying themselves to manage the company that they own.
Right.
And at ManorCare, those fees averaged about $3 million a year from 2007 to 2015, which is $27 million total. And in the 3 years, after prior to the bankruptcy, there was the standard of care was declining so fast and so obviously that they were ManorCare was the subject of numerous lawsuits. There was a dozen families filing lawsuits against the company based on the issues, things that had happened with family members and stuff like that. The Carlyle Group was asked for comment on this one. This is a good one. You'll like this. When asked about the rise in legal complaints at the Pottsville nursing home facility, they said that Pennsylvania had been, quote, increasingly targeted by out-of-state trial attorneys.
Fuck off. Never mind. I'm not gonna get into it.
Yeah, I mean that's about it, man. It's grim, it's awful, it's really sickening stuff because this is specifically just the way these firms operate in general is really despicable. But to do this sort of thing at a nursing home when you're this is a very vulnerable group of people that do need specialists and they do need attention. They do need management that gives a shit about patient care because people's lives are on the line.
Yes.
As some of these anecdotes sort of illustrated, it doesn't take really all that much neglect. It doesn't take really that much, right? If you cut the staffing and these sort of things start happening, and you just have fewer eyes out there and fewer people that are able to care for these people, then this is the kind of thing that you get, and this is the bread and butter of this industry.
Yes. It's something I've been thinking about a lot lately about the kind of just ethos of how American capitalism works. And, we talked about it, I think, on the Patreon episode about the last one about, colonial capitalism. And the idea of the setup is to convert human suffering into shareholder value. Mm-hmm. Simple as that. The worse, the more profitable, frankly. That's kind of how it works. All right. So this is the thing that, again, I think when we're trying to figure out who is David Rubenstein and what is his function within the Carlyle Group and within our political economy as a whole, and it really is for him to manipulate on the government level the the kinds of things that will eventually enrich his and his ideology's bottom line. So I came across a very interesting 2016 article by ProPublica, which I can't sing their praises enough, called "The Patriot: How Philanthropist David Rubenstein Helped Save a Tax Break Billionaire's Love." It's outstanding. And so it says here, a private equity mogul lauded for his patriotic donations has quietly worked to protect one source of his wealth, the carried interest loophole. And let me just see if I can give a quick, just a quick kind of one-liner or whatever on what the carried interest loophole is. So I'm just reading here from just the Americans for Financial Reform, and it says here, the carried interest loophole is an income tax avoidance scheme that allows private equity and hedge funds executives to substantially lower the amount they pay in taxes. So how do they do that? The carried interest loophole allows private equity barons to claim large parts of their compensation for services as investment gains, which allows them to pay lower tax rates than middle-class taxpayers pay on their wages and other compensation. This is also known as the hedge fund loophole. You may have heard it by that term. The loophole exacerbates income and wealth inequality. We know this. Treating carried interest income as ordinary compensation income could raise between $1.4 and $18 billion annually. So, okay, so that's how you understand. Look, it's just a way for them to claim income differently on their taxes. So how did David Rubenstein go about this? And this was interesting. I can't believe that this happened, but it says here, and I do remember this. You might remember this. On August 23rd, 2011, a magnitude 5.8 earthquake. Leave it in.
Yeah, fuck it.
A magnitude 5.8 earthquake shook the Washington Monument for about 20 seconds.
I do remember that because I was living in Virginia at that time.
I was gonna say, yeah.
I remember I was at a restaurant when that happened.
Wild. I've felt there was one earthquake that hit the area here. Yeah, I think I was in Long Island at the time. It was like a magnitude 2 earthquake, which is like, a freaking mouse fart. It's nothing. But like, I remember feeling it, and like, it was so wild. I can't imagine what 5 point. Of course, all of our California listeners are just like, dude. Anyway, so what did it do? It sent the tourists on the observation deck of the Washington Monument down 897 steps. One of the 2 strongest quakes ever recorded east of the Rockies. It fractured 24 of the stone protrusions that hold up the marble slabs on the top of the monument's peak. That December, Congress appropriated half of the $15 million required to repair the obelisk, saying the rest would have to be raised from private citizens, which is fucking bonkers to me, but okay. It said within weeks, David Rubenstein, the co-founder of the Carlyle Group, a private equity firm, announced that he would provide the funds. And on June 2nd, in 2013, 2 years later, Rubenstein joined the Secretary of the Interior and the head of the National Park Service to inspect the progress atop of the scaffolding. So all the way at the top.
It'd be funny if he bought it and then did it the same as he does. He just stripped all the marble out of it and sold it.
Well, he put his mark on it. It says in public appearances, he often tells what happens next in a deadpan manner that says he's joking. He recalled last year at a Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, he said, while his hosts were looking away to leave his mark, quote, I took a pen out and wrote my initials at the very top. It just says to me so much that this is like a perfect, I've always wanted to look up what the word simulacra means. Is this a simulacrum? Simulacrum? An image or representation of someone or something. Yeah, hey. I learned a word today.
Oh, yeah.
This is a simulacrum, right? This is it's perfect. He wants to own the public things, right? He put his name on it. So anyway, again, the article goes and talks about his background, the things that he's interested in, the fucking Magna Carta insane thing. But it gets to this carried interest idea. So the notion of carried interest derives from the share of profits that 12th century ship captains received on a cargo that they carried. It came into its modern usage in the 1920s in the oil and gas industry and was enshrined in the federal tax code in 1954. When a group of partners drilled for oil, a few would put up the money and others would invest only their labor or sweat equity, finding land and investors, buying equipment, that sort of thing. If partners sold out, the IRS would tax the profits of all the partners at a lower rate for capital gains rather than ordinary income, like we just learned. So over time, partnerships in other industries, mainly real estate and venture capital, began taking advantage of the same form of taxation. Their work is essentially a combination of investment banking and management consulting. This is exactly what you were talking about before, Chris, about how kind of private equity runs. They are compensated not for building new ventures from scratch, with the risk that entails, but for managing the investments of wealthy individuals in pension funds and other institutional clients. These funds pooled, along with borrowed money, to acquire private companies or take public companies private before making improvements, or cutting costs and selling at a big profit. So even if no profits are realized, private equity firms get paid, exactly like what you were talking about, Chris. Under the 2 and 20 compensation structure, they receive a 2% fee annually on assets under management, in addition to a 20% cut of profits beyond a given benchmark. Insane.
Don't forget the fee they get for managing it as well.
Exactly. Again, so for the past 15 years, long-term capital gains have been taxed at 15% compared with 35% for ordinary income on this tax bracket. One name for this tax break is the hedge fund loophole, but hedge funds benefit much less than private equity does because their trades tend to be too short-term to qualify for the low capital gains rate. At a Credit Suisse forum in Miami in 2013, Rubenstein said of private equity, "Carried interest is really what the business has historically been about, producing distributions for your investors from good sales and IPOs and getting 20% of the profits for yourself. That's how we've really grown our business." And this is so amazing to me. It says Barack Obama, during his first presidential campaign, pledged to reform the tax on carried interest. And in 2012, that was a terrible impression. In 2012, went after Mitt Romney for having enjoyed its benefits as the co-founder of Bain Capital. This year, Bernie Sanders, and of course, this is from a 2016 article. We all remember what happened there. Bernie Sanders, Hillary Clinton, and Donald Trump have all attacked the loophole, often using hedge fund managers as the rhetorical target. As Trump put it in August, "They're paying nothing. It's ridiculous. These guys shift paper around and they get lucky." Jeb Bush, who made a foray into private equity in 2014, what a fucking loser, also called for the closing of the loophole during his ill-fated campaign. All right, so again, but it says here, so far the partners have won out. Despite the rise of anti-Wall Street sentiment after the 2008 collapse, the loophole has withstood every effort at reform. So how did David Rubenstein specifically lobby for the continuance of this carried interest tax loophole? In the summer of 2007, David Rubenstein went to Capitol Hill to appeal to the Democrats. He visited the Finance Committee offices, according to former staffers, and met with Baucus, right, Max Baucus. Rubenstein's familiarity with Capitol Hill provided what so many others tried to acquire by means of campaign contributions. He was on a first-name basis with dozens of members of Congress. One lobbyist who visited Capitol Hill with Rubenstein told me that he has a policy focus. He's very cerebral and could make an argument and articulate it. He's a salesman. He's created a sort of halo effect wherever he goes. So that's his function within the firm, right? Is to know the comings and goings of the political superstructure that exists. It says here, during the same period, Bruce Rosenblum, a managing director at Carlyle who was then the chair of the Private Equity Council, appeared before several congressional committees. He argued, among other things, that the industry served the economy by streamlining companies and producing investment gains for pension funds. See? And that raising taxes on private equity might prompt some firms to move abroad. What a fucking...
Why do you want to punish them for being successful, Dwight?
It's like the same line over and over. Like I remember Andrew Cuomo was asked about when talking about like taxing New Yorkers and stuff. They're just gonna move. They're gonna go down to Florida. They're gonna go up to Connecticut. We can't do it. You can't do it. Where was I here? Speaking before the Senate Finance Committee in July, he challenged the notion that private equity partners were not true entrepreneurs. Is creating the next Google more important than an investment to strengthen iconic American brands such as Dunkin' Donuts and Burger King? I love it. In September, Rosenblum testified before the House Ways and Means Committee. Rubenstein was his implicit subject. He says here, this is a quote, "The relentless media and political focus of a handful of highly successful founders of large private equity firms ignores the fact that these individuals, like many other successful business founders, were not necessarily rich when they started their businesses." Victor Fleischer testified at the same hearing saying, the partnership tax rules were designed with small businesses in mind, not billion-dollar investment funds. So again, you can see the kind of like ideological push and pull here, right? Now it says, after President Obama was sworn in, he was cautioned by Treasury Secretary Tim Geithner not to go after high finance too hard. Geithner, I love it. Geithner worried that imperiling the fragile recovery, and he wanted to coax financiers into accepting other industry reforms. Even so, by 2010, when the recession had officially been over for several months, congressional Democrats were talking about closing the carried interest loophole with renewed seriousness. So who fucking pops up? In May of 2010, when Rubenstein returned to Capitol Hill, he was the perfect good guy, a private equity lobbyist told me. Unlike these guys throwing themselves $1 million birthday parties, David is donating the Magna Carta to charity. Evan Bayh, or however you say it, Evan Bayh, the Democratic senator from Indiana and the son of Rubenstein's former boss, was among those receiving visits from private equity lobbyists. And soon Bayh was heard arguing that taxing the enterprise value was unfair. Bayh, who left the Senate 6 months later, now works for Apollo. For those that haven't heard our Leon Black episode, please go back and listen to that. Apollo Global Management, a huge, enormous fucking, freaking vulture capital firm. Asked to comment, he said through a spokeswoman that he does not recall much about this, given it was 6 years ago. So the debate unfolded in the Senate, yada, 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 yada. On June 8th, Rubenstein's cell phone rang as he was speaking to supporters of the Economic Club at the Phillips Collection. He left the stage to take the call. Among those in the audience was Gary Shapiro, the consumer electronics lobbyist who was Rubenstein's travel companion to Japan in the 1980s. I love that shit. After a few minutes, Shapiro recalls, Rubenstein returned and said, "That was a senator. That one call just saved us on carried interest." I should say here in parentheses, it said, Rubenstein denies making this comment. On June 30th, in the last of several votes, the package came up 3 votes short. In the end, the private equity lobbyists ran out the clock. Since 2010, when Republicans retook control of Congress, prospects for closing the loophole have not been revived. It's just incredible to me. Again, what's the point of Rubenstein in this, in this freaking Leviathan? It's to do exactly that. To be the good guy, 12 million, or 21 million, however much it was to buy the Magna Carta. It's a rounding error for him. But what does it afford him, right? It affords him this good guy reputation. Yeah, no, Rubenstein's a swell guy. Yeah, we'll take a call from him. And that's it. They're all part of the club. His job is to show up, to eat some cheese and crackers, have some bad Pinot Grigio, and smile and be cool with everybody. And he is the face that makes the acceptability quotient to these people that would otherwise have the power to seize this fucking wealth, to take our fucking tax dollars. Like that's what's so crazy about like us, us meaning like working people that don't have this money or whatever, talking about paying taxes and stuff. And it's like, we're not the problem. These people are the problem. The money that we need we're gonna drive over bridges 1,000 miles an hour. They'll stop our supply chain problem. All these wimps going behind the wheel. They're not going. You got to go 80. They're the things we need to do to like make the country functional requires seizing these people's money and these assets and closing these loopholes. I mean, I obviously, we haven't made our ideology that much of a secret. If they're not going to give it to us, we will simply have to take it. But, we're not leaving it up to the same people that they're buddies with is not going to do it. If you're familiar or if you're interested in reading the entirety of this article, I highly recommend that you do so, because it's so crazy, like how interconnected all this shit it is when we talk about Mark Warner and Chuck Schumer and Evan Bayh and all that stuff. It's just it's pretty unbelievable. But in interest of time, since we're already going long, let me turn it back over to you, Chris, and to I mean, just for the record, when we did this, when we were thinking about doing this episode, I did the first thing that we have to do whenever we research somebody, is that you type in the person's name and then another person's name, and that second person's name is very important.
Yes.
So let me turn it over to you.
It's no mystery. But basically, anytime we cover one of these people, there is going to be some sort of Jeffrey Epstein connection. And we mentioned earlier the Council on Foreign Relations that David Rubenstein is the chair of. Well, Jeffrey Epstein was a member of the Council on Foreign Relations from 1995 to 2009. During that time frame, he gave $350,000 in donations to the council. After his initial conviction in 2008, his membership was not revoked. In fact, it wasn't until much after that. And when it finally was revoked, it wasn't because of his indictment or his conviction or anything. It was on the basis of non-payment of dues. That's why they revoked his membership. It wasn't about the child sex trafficking and stuff like that.
No.
They eventually did. Just in 2019, give the money that he had donated over the years. They did finally do that, but they really dragged their feet on it for a long time and said that they weren't going to do that, said that we spent that money years ago. We don't have that money anymore. What do you want us to do? And they sort of tried to, defend their decision to hang on to this money, to not revoke his membership. When this happened, their excuse for that was that they didn't connect. This is a quote here. "We did not connect the news of Epstein's conviction with Epstein's membership." And
fuck off.
Yeah, obviously. But they did eventually, after a much, I think, public scrutiny of this. They, I guess, sort of realized that they had to. So they did. They did give the. Does look like they did redirect the money to human trafficking, anti-human trafficking organizations and stuff like that. So I just wanted to touch again on another Epstein connection here. And we did mention earlier Alice Rogoff, who was David Rubenstein's wife from 1983 to 2017. Even though they didn't actually live together for like half of that time, she had moved to Alaska in 2002 and had lived there, I believe, past that, from then on. And so I guess she was up there visiting friends in Alaska. She went up to visit. Her friend was a pilot. She decided then that she wanted to move to Alaska and also fly planes. So she moves to Anchorage and she buys a Cessna and she learns to fly it. Not particularly well, I guess, because she did crash it in 2016.
Nope.
She was attempting to not injured. She was attempting to land when she clipped a tree that had an eagle's nest in it. They mentioned that in the article. Shit. Yeah, she clipped the tree and then crashed the plane into the harbor. Some of the other activities.
She went to the Ted Stevens flight school.
So she some of her other stuff that she got into while she was in Alaska, she became the majority owner of the Alaska Dispatch newspaper in 2008. And then in 2014, brokered a deal where the Alaska Dispatch would purchase the Anchorage Daily News, which was another large newspaper in Alaska, which they purchased for $34 million. I mean, I guess I can't really say that she ran the newspaper like she did the plane, because the plane crashed into the water, but the newspaper, she did run it into the ground. And in 2017, 3 years after 3 years at the helm, the paper went bankrupt, and Alice did step down from that position. Now, the other interesting little wrinkle here about Alice that I did want to mention. Because again, no examination of these sickos is complete without a couple Epstein connections. Ghislaine Maxwell was a personal friend of Alice Rogoff's for a while, and visited her in Alaska several times. She also spoke at Alice Rogoff had an organization called the Arctic Circle Assembly that she had started. Ghislaine Maxwell was a speaker at one of their events in Iceland. In 2014, Maxwell and Rogoff attended the Iditarod dog sled race together. And this is 2014. This is 6 years after,
right?
6 years after Epstein's initial conviction. And I just wanted to read briefly here. Here's a statement from this is a guy named Tony Hopfinger, who was the Alaska Dispatch's co-founder, and here's him talking a little bit about their friendship. Maxwell, Kylie, which is his wife, and I flew with the pilot to White Mountain. During the flight, Maxwell bragged about her life, everything from the nonprofit to the places she'd visited to the fact that she knew how to fly a helicopter. Kylie and I sat in the back while she talked to Paul, at times flirting with him. We listened to her and Paul on the plane's headphones. At one point, she told Paul she learned how to fly helicopters from an ex-boyfriend who had served in the IDF and Mossad.
Perfect.
And Alice says that it was at that time when she came up to visit in 2014 when they went to the Iditarod that was the last time that they were on friendly terms. She says that she had not been aware of anything about Epstein or any of that. Again, this is 2014. She says that she Googled her and was horrified by what she discovered. The interesting thing about that, though,
this what bullshit, dude.
I mean,
Google it.
Didn't stop her from still 4 years later in 2018. She was still promoting Ghislaine Maxwell's fake charity, the Terramar Project, which she actually wrote an op-ed endorsing in another Alaska newspaper. Here's a quote from that. The Terramar Project was set up to address our ownership of the oceans, meaning we all have a responsibility and are equal partners in protecting the areas of ocean that lie outside any one country's jurisdiction, which is a staggering 64%. She then said that since 2012, they have grown into an incredibly active nonprofit, creating what can only be called a global ocean community. In support of their work, I ask you to sign their passport and join 76,000 other members in their pledge to love our ocean. And again, this is...
Again, it's like the ownership thing. It's like, how are we going to own the things? I think what she's saying is like, the things that are international waters.
Exactly. Yeah.
Is like a no man's land, and somebody's got to own it so that... the implication is that only under private ownership is something taken care of. Or is there any sense of stewardship? Which again, of course, would be their ethos because they're fucking billionaires.
And again, this is 2018. This is 4 years after she's cut off communication with this sex trafficker because she was so horrified by what she discovered about her, and yet still she's like writing op-eds endorsing this. Literally, it's like fake charity. It was basically most of their like the Terramar public filings. It was basically exclusively funded by loans from Ghislaine Maxwell. Like it wasn't like a real fucking organization. It was not. It's just like a fake thing where she could fucking I guess be a philanthropist, and because they're always seeking that. They're always seeking to be viewed as a philanthropist and to put on these conferences and have people see you doing this charitable work. It's fake. It's bullshit.
Yes. I mean, look, to kind of put this towards a wrap up here. God, we went long on this guy. It's again, I think you described it perfectly, Chris. Like he won the time machine lottery.
Yeah,
he was at this nexus of this push towards neoliberalism. That is to say, the privatization or creation of any markets away from any public, ownership. At a time where he knew a bunch of people in Washington. And he understands what his shtick is. He understands that the point of him is to be that smiley kind of convivial guy in front of everybody that kind of knows what's going on and will just be the cocktail party guy. That's what he is. That's what he looks like. Like that's his like affect, is to just be like, I'm the business guy and everybody knows me and I know everybody.
I'm Danny Duberstein.
You know, if you get,
I have Crohn's disease.
that's his point. That's the point of him. And he owns a fucking copy of the Magna Carta. That's just so crazy to me. Again, you know, these people shouldn't have the means, let alone, you know, to purchase these sorts of things, let alone, you know, the ability to purchase them. Mm-hmm. It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, you know, again, I guess kind of like talking a bit more about like the neoliberal project. I mean, you know, ultimately what, and this was really sort of like discussed very openly at the time, like Paul Volcker, the chairman of the Federal Reserve, like said publicly in a congressional committee, in a congressional testimony, that the American people need to get used to a lower quality of life if we need to beat inflation. That's basically that was Unreal. They were very sort of open about sort of what they were doing is allowing capital to accumulate again, like it had prior to the First World War, like in the early 20th century, and basically sort of like reestablish this sort of a class system, because the working class had gotten it too good for too long, and they were very open and frank, honestly, some of them about the kind of stuff that they were doing, and it was very deliberately to allow this kind of capital to accumulate in so few hands again. And David Rubenstein, he's been there from the very beginning. He was in the at the ground zero in the White House when these policies were being discussed and enacted, and he's benefited greatly from it ever since.
Yep. What a joke! What a joke! All right, folks, that's enough on David Rubenstein. And again, I hope we get a chance to like go into more of the ills of the Carlyle Group, because it will never be a fucking boring episode when we're talking about private equity, because it's just, again, in any fucking functioning country, these behaviors or these, business activities or business models would never exist. No way. Not even close. Oh, God. Okay, we're stopping here. All right, folks. Till next time.
Good night.
Stay cool.
This man likes some of the hip-hop music, maybe a little DJing. Carlyle co-founder David Rubenstein, he recorded a holiday video for his investors. And no, it wasn't talking about their biggest deals of the year. He took a page from Dr. Dre. The two know each other well, since Carlyle was one of the top investors in Beats headphones before Apple bought it. So watch this.
Takes a lot of brains to do what we do. Looking for a way to make some dough for you. Energy, commodity, we do it all. So pick up the phone and give us a call. Corporate mezzanine, private equity, Carlyle Group is the place to be. We're global, we're mobile, we're aiming to please. Only goal of mine, serve LPs. LPs, serve LPs. LPs, serve LPs. LPs, serve LPs.